We're going to get started and transition into our workshop. Kelvin will kind of be the sage of the stage, kind of leading things, and I'll try to monitor the room. So if you have kind of sidebar questions, flag my attention and I'll come around to you. If he's going too quickly or you have a question that everyone benefits from, be a little bit more grandiose in your gestures so we stop and address those things. You may or may not have seen the advertisement that if you attend this workshop today, that you get a 4-month free access to Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. So if you didn't see that before, here you go. The address at the top is how you redeem that. So account.wolfram.com, redeem, and then the code that follows. Those of you that have already installed Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, I'm not sure process-wise what this prompts you to do. So if this is asking you to install a new subscription, again, you can email me, ashleyb@wolfram.com. I can save you a lot of installation time. We can just flip the subscription you already have installed to get the 4 months of access. So if you're prompted to install something else, don't do that. Just email me, please.
So we have to do this in addition to like downloading stuff today?
Well, I assume what you downloaded today is the trial. So that's time limited. So after 15 days, that would expire. But this is for 4 months. So I'm saying I'm not completely sure because I just saw this redemption code just now, so I haven't tested it myself. I'm not sure if when you go to redeem that.
Early on before I came here, and it said 4 months. So
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect.
Okay, good.
Did you use this link though, or?
I went to the conference, and it said download it in preparation for this conference, which I did.
Perfect.
It's
Yeah.
That was on your page associated with this conference.
Okay. Yeah. So to clarify, if you just went to the standard website and said try now and downloaded the trial, that will be 15 days. But if you use the Pathable site and then use that link, it was already this 4-month license. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Last thing, as people were filtering in, if you have not already installed Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, it is a large installation because, again, it's built on top of Mathematica. However, our tech team is here, the two gentlemen that are standing up with us. They have jump drives with it, with the installation that you can start loading on your machine. So please do that so that you can at least get some first-hand experience today. Cool. Go ahead, Kelvin.
All right, good. All right, so this is designed to be a hands-on session where everyone types along with us. If I'm going too fast or going too slow, let me know. But I'm going to be typing things bit by bit by bit, and you're going to work along with me. But the goal of this is just to get a feel for Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, do your first couple calculations, and gain some experience with it. So looking around the room, I can partially answer this myself. But by a quick show of hands, how many of you have used wolframalpha.com somewhat extensively? Oh, strange answer. Okay, less than I thought. Okay. How many of you have used Mathematica and have good experience with that? You have experience. Yeah, it runs and it gives you outputs that are useful for your research and teaching. Okay, so more Mathematica users than wolframalpha.com users. Okay, how many of you Mathematica users have experimented with the freeform input mode in Mathematica? Okay, interesting. Okay, so I'll try to focus a little bit more than on the man behind the curtain, so to speak. Okay, so everyone launch Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, and when you launch it, you should see the welcome screen. So everyone launch Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, and then just hit New Document to get a new notebook. so that we've all got a blank notebook to look at. And if things pop up and start asking you for keys or logins or whatever, make sure to log in or raise your hand and ask us if you have questions. But hopefully everybody will get to the point where you're seeing a blank screen here. Good? Okay. So let's start with something super simple. 14 plus 71, and hit enter. Now for those of you that use Mathematica a lot, you hit enter and not shift enter. So if you hit shift enter, that makes a new line. If you hit enter, that makes a calculation. Why did we do that? Well, because the people that are not used to our notebooks, they always hit enter to do things. They hit enter on a web page, they hit enter everywhere. So enter is how you do calculations. Okay, I don't hear any objections, so I think we're all rolling. So similar to notebooks, the horizontal line is the spot where you do new calculations. If you just have the horizontal line and you just start typing, like 5 to the 3rd power or something like that, by default, the product creates this Wolfram Alpha notebook input cell. So it doesn't create a Wolfram language input cell. It doesn't create a text cell. By default, the default new cell is the Wolfram language, the Wolfram Alpha notebook edition cell. Okay, is there anybody who's stuck getting this far, or are we all good? Okay. Everyone else okay with logging in and getting everything? Okay, good. So next thing, let's create a...
So Kelvin,
yeah.
one quick thing that I think a lot of people just inherently understood, but to make it explicit, one major difference between Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition and Mathematica is that Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition is using that free form input, using Wolfram Alpha, so it has to have an internet connection, so you can tap
yes.
back to our server.
Yes.
So where you can run Mathematica just on your machine and not have access to the internet, you have to have access to the internet for Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition to run.
Yes, thank you. That's a very good point. And the reason why we do that is we are piggybacking on the very, very, very good Wolfram Alpha technology, where in the background we're updating things not every major Wolfram language version, but much more frequently. So what everyday English you use today that might not work, it might work tomorrow or next week or in a couple weeks, not necessarily when you install an entire new version of the software. So there's a lot of advantages to that. Okay, so let's go back up to the top. So click on the top to get a horizontal bar, and then click the plus key to get the cell insertion assistant, and then choose title. And then let's get some experience with this, where you can make a title called Hands-on Start or something like that. So similar to Mathematica or our other products, a notebook is a collection of cells. So the divisions over here, we have text cells, we have calculation cells, but what we're doing today is just building up our first notebook, which is a collection of cells. So this is a title cell. Then we can make a section cell below it. So if we click and get the horizontal bar and click the cell insertion assistant and then click section, we can make something like basic calculations. Hopefully my spelling is going to be good today. And just as I showed in the last training, we've got the hierarchy of cells now as well. So if you double click on the outermost cell, that collapses all the basic calculation inputs. If you click the arrow or double click on the outside, then it reveals that again. So when you're teaching, and when I do training sessions, I am somewhat addicted to this sort of style. So I hate it when people read ahead. It drives me up a wall. So when I'm doing presentations, I very commonly have sections with sometimes a lot of examples, but I will tuck them away a lot. So in teaching, when you don't want students to read ahead, this idea of tucking this away and then revealing it as you go, even if you have the whole thing pre-typed, is really, 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 really handy. Okay, let's make another section cell. Let's go to Format. So instead of using the Cell Insertion Assistant, let's go to Format and Style, and then Section. But you can see here that the keyboard shortcuts all work for Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition as well. I am a heavy user of the Alt-4, Alt-3, Alt-2 sort of thing. So if we click and get a section cell, you can do that. Or if you highlight the cell on the outside and start clicking Alt 1, 2, 3, 4, well, let me put something in here. So arithmetic or something like that. So if you click Alt 1, Alt 2, 3, 4, etc., then you scroll through the different types of cells, just like Mathematica.
So on a Macintosh, we don't have the alt.
Sorry, yes, Command on Mac. And the Format menu should say, instead of Alt, it should say Command as well.
Help you with timing. The people who didn't have it already installed are about halfway through the installation.
Okay, got it.
But there is one thing I found just being a little confusing, is that in the cell itself, you hit return and it calculates.
Yeah.
When you're entering these sections and titles, et cetera, the return just increases the size, and so that's just increases the cell length.
Oh, yes, yes.
Rather than returns and goes to the next line. So it conforms to
I see.
standard Mathematica notebooks.
I see.
Rather than what a new user might consider.
Yeah.
So they would have to do an arrow down.
Yeah.
Down to the next one.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point.
Probably want to have a return there or something.
Yeah, that's an interesting suggestion. Someone from our group, is someone from our group taking a few notes, like Zach or Clayton? Okay, good. Yeah. So, and that's a good point. So, me being a Mathematica person, thank you for stopping me here, but the arrow up and arrow down through the sections is the typical way to do this. But yeah, and what he was saying is if you hit return here, you're just getting a longer section cell. You're not getting a new cell or a different cell. You have to arrow down to get a different cell and then start that, basically, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting suggestion. I don't know what my gut reaction is to that. I can see it being very useful, but thinking myself in a text cell, I'm constantly doing carriage returns where I want spaces in a text cell. I don't know if I want to have to do Shift Enter for that or remember something. It's a good suggestion, yeah.
So my gut says I would like to see a flag that tells you, did you mean to da-da-da?
So if
That's
I-
what would help the teacher and the student. And we would rather mimic what happens in Mathematica for those people who would eventually transition to that environment. We wouldn't want you to have to relearn, but
Yeah.
helping them see through the process would be helpful.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's do our next calculation. So if you just start typing, let's do 16 over 72 and hit enter. And this is, from my experience, it's one of the first questions that your students have, which is, I typed some fraction in here or something exact. If you type an exact input, you tend to get an exact output. If you type a numerical input, like 16 over 72.0, then you get a numerical output. But this is the first sort of thing that students ask about, which is sometimes they want to do the former, sometimes they want to do the latter, but they will at different times want to do both. Next thing, let's type where you can just say explicitly, so 16 over 72 to 3 digits. And so then we get a direct numeric approximation. And then I think this is the first thing that we've done in this session where we can see now a Wolfram language function. So now we're learning the n function with square brackets and 3 decimal places and things like that. Are we good so far? Should I go a little faster?
Did you say 16 over 72 to decimal?
I think so. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So let's then do another one where let's do pi to 1,000 digits. So I just want to make the general comment that pi is a symbol built into the language. So this is all based on Wolfram language. It is a way to take everyday English and turn it into computation, but the computation itself is done in Wolfram language. So pi to 1,000 digits, we know what pi is. Okay, let's set a new subsection here. So let's use the keyboard shortcut, hit Alt 5 or Command 5 on a Mac. And we'll call this variables and defining functions. And also, before we go too much farther, you should probably just save your work. So unlike Wolfram Cloud, and Stephen talked about this in the Q&A, there's no auto-save happening here. If you see untitled at the top, nothing really is saved. So if you go to File and then Save As, name this something like Wolfram Tech Conference. That's a terrible... I tend to name things really, really long because I tend to search through my machine a lot, but that's sort of obnoxious. But if you save it as a notebook, then what's happening is this is saving as a local notebook on your local machine. And as I said in the last talk, if other people are using the Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition on their machines, you can email them notebooks, they open it, and then they can do live calculations. A notebook is a notebook is a notebook. And then also, I think we'll enter this world where the recipients, you might not know if they have Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition or Mathematica or quite what they have. And that should not get you into trouble either. Yes?
If you use Mathematica and you do something complicated and then iconize some data, if you send this to, like, your brother-in-law who doesn't want to spend a lot of money, can he open that in the notebook edition and it'll have the data that was iconized and all the stuff?
I believe so, yes.
So this is like kind of a better Wolfram player, sort of.
I mean, yeah.
Well, because they'll also have authorship. So with the player, it's just a viewer.
Correct.
Whereas with Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, they can also create content themselves. So when you sent them their notebook that you did this very complicated thing, maybe they start a text cell and said, wow, this was super cool, and I tried this thing, and they
Yes.
did natural language.
Unless they had Player Pro, maybe.
But that is a good point.
Unless they
Because
have
then there
Player
is
Pro,
some
right,
authorship
right.
there too, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would describe it as, I mean, there is a hobbyist home edition of this. I would describe it as if your brother-in-law is a little bit intimidated by Mathematica, this is a more approachable way to look at the stuff that you have and do a bit of things himself. Yeah. So, but as Ashley said, the authorship and the changing what you're doing and really working with it, that's the big difference between Wolfram Player and this. Okay.
Some of the people who installed starting at the start of the workshop are live now, Kelvin.
All right, good.
Woo!
All right, well, you only missed arithmetic, so I think you'll be okay. All right, so let's practice defining some variables. So let's say set b equal to 5. And again, for those of you that teach with Wolfram language, that teach with Mathematica, in a lot of cases, the classes, this is fine, students can handle it, but there's always a conversation about what is a single equals versus what is a double equals. In many cases, that's a very fruitful conversation. It's totally right for the class. In a college algebra class, maybe that's not the conversation you want to have. So in this case, set b equals to 5, that does what it says it does, basically. All right, and then let's do something where we say b squared plus 5b, oh, not equals, that's, and hit return. So a quick comment here that I am saying 5x. I'm not saying 5 star x. I'm not saying 5 space x. I'm just saying 5x. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, yeah, sorry, x.
So you literally, sorry, just explain around.
Let's-
You literally cannot do the same thing as set just by saying b equal 5.
Correct.
It just told me true instead of 5.
Correct. Yeah, you do have to say set or define or something like that. That's yeah, we talked a lot about that. If you just say b equals 5, right now it's testing equality, and it's treating it as a symbol. So, yeah,
Maybe I shouldn't, I missed that earlier session, so I'll stop asking.
oh no, that's fine. No, that's fine. I went through the last one very, very fast, and this one is the slow ask questions version, so it's totally good. Okay, so now let's do unset b, and evaluate that. And then, when I'm doing trainings or when I'm teaching students, a lot of times they think about notebooks in a top-to-bottom sort of proposition, where they think about the calculations in a very sort of, the thing at the top happens, and the next thing happens, and the next thing happens. So this sort of thing confuses them a little bit, where if we go back up here and reevaluate b squared plus 5b, now the answer that we get is no longer 70 or whatever it was. Now it's b squared plus 5b, because now we have unset b. So this sort of thing is really, really useful and really powerful in notebooks, but it takes students just a tick to get this. All right, let's do a function. Yes?
So is there any way of knowing the order in which you're doing that? Because if we do what we just did, how do we know where we unset B, went back to, we changed it and did that?
Yeah, it might be a little hard for you to see out there, but the input-output labels, just like in Mathematica, are in order of the session. So this is my 81st calculation of the day, and now that's my 82nd calculation of the day. And so, yeah, and so that's the order. But the order is what's going through the kernel. So in terms of technology, the interface and the thing doing the calculation are very separate things in really cool ways. And the other thing too, when I restart this notebook from scratch tomorrow and evaluate this top to bottom, you do have to think a little bit about, did I set this before? Did I set it after? What's it going to do? That sort of thing. Okay, let's define a function. So if we say set f of x equals x squared plus 5x plus 6, something like that. Now we have a function definition. And again, there are a lot of cases where discussing what x underscore and colon equals, like delayed assignment, there's a lot of cases where that's a very fruitful conversation, where if someone is going on to do some data science or some programming and creating user-defined functions and doing something really neat, that's a great conversation to have. Sometimes it might not be. So in this case, you can just say f of x equals, and then the Wolfram language syntax is there, but if you want to gloss over it, you can. One other thing too on that point, there's this drop-down menu here where you can start to hide things. So if you want to hide Wolfram language, hide Wolfram language inputs. So if you create a notebook and you say hide that, then all we're getting here, although I'm not on anything with any actual outputs, which is a bad example, but let me scroll up here. Yeah, so this one, where now we have the b squared plus 5b, and then we have the output, but we don't have the Wolfram language in the middle. So if you do want to create a notebook and then tuck all that away, there's an option to do that. You can also hide the query details, which is that drop-down menu. So the related computations and the suggestions bar and things like that. So this is an even more streamlined, clean view. And then if you want to get them back, then you just say show all, and then they all come back. I think we would be curious to hear feedback on which of those you prefer. I personally have them on and sort of leave them on all the time, but I think my perspective and your perspective might be a touch different in that. So it would be interesting to know after you tinker with this for a while. All right, but now let's do something with f. So let's do f of 10. So since this is now defined as a function, we can pass a specific numeric value through this, and we get a 156. Or we can do a derivative with this sort of typical notation. Let me get this where you can see the top. There we go. And so now we have f of 10. We also have the derivative of f of x. And then if we really want to push things a little bit, we can say the derivative of f of x where x equals 10. This is starting to, from my perspective, this is starting to be pretty useful where it's doing more than one thing at a time. So, for those of you that don't have a lot of experience with Wolfram Alpha, the idea for the Wolfram Alpha is it takes everyday English, it turns into something computable, which works very, very well for single visualizations, single calculations. It is difficult to react to multi-step things. So if you want to customize a calculation or you want to do a bunch of things at once, that becomes very tricky. So this is pretty cool, where it's doing a derivative, but also swapping in a specific numeric value, and it's sort of doing it all at once. And so it saves you the trouble of defining some sort of intermediate variable or something like that. You can just swap that in. Let's do one more variable definition, or I'm sorry, function definition. Let's do set g of xy equal to x to the y. Is that a comma? Yeah, okay. And then we can use g, where we can say what's g of 10 comma 10. And so that's 10 to the 10th when we feed it through this function. So someone mentioned this in the last talk as well. The initial examples that we have in the initial web page, they are math slanted for the original rollout. This is a very useful product for the math that goes into physics and the math that goes into chemistry and the math that goes into anything, or just general computation. But the things that we're showing in kind of the initial release, they do have a little bit more of a math slant. And the things that we've built in terms of related calculations, this initial release tends to be a little bit more math slanted as well. All right, let's do a new subsection. So Alt 5 or Control 5. And then let's look at algebra. And then I'm going to type in, when I see students use wolframalpha.com, the website, I'm going to type in the thing that they always type in first, which is graph, y equals, and then something. But that idea of the Wolfram language way to plot things is plot. Students often say graph. All right, let's take this one step further. Let's do a graph of two equations. So y equals 2x squared minus 2, and y equals 2x minus 2. It's kind of a lot of 2's in that example. So again, the idea that we're using two equations here is recognized. There's curly brackets in a plot, which is pretty neat. We also get this nice plot legend here so that you can see the line is this orange color and the 2x is the blue color. And so you can tell them apart really nicely. All right, then let's do some solving. So let's solve 2x minus 2 equals 0 for x. I would say this is the other top thing, question that I get from students when they're looking at if they're using Mathematica for the first time, which is they type in solve, but they use 1 equals here in the middle of the solve, and then they get an error message that says you can't set 2x minus 2 to something, and they get a little confused. So this is a nice way to do a solve, but they use the everyday English that they use for that, and then they can sort of ease into the Wolfram language. All right, so far we've done text, we've done titles, we've done subsections. We've done titles, subsections, we have not done text. So let's do a new plain text cell, which is Alt 7. Oh, it's 7, just the same as Mathematica. That's useful. So let's type in, here are some examples in algebra, calculus, and linear algebra. So one thing for courseware that you might want to do is you have this text, but you might want to style it in some way. So all the key things, so if you highlight sum and hit Control B to bold that works. Or if you Control I to do italics, that works. Or if you highlight a word and you go to the Format drop-down menu, so you have face, you have size, you have text color, background color. So these key things, so if we want to make this red in terms of text color, so these key things in the Format drop-down menu for styling text are there. So if you want to make something a certain font or a different font or choose your font or something like that, you can do that up here.
Kelvin, did you do a quick keyboard stroke to do that or something?
Possibly.
When you got the little box popped up in the bottom left of the screen, when you were first putting the text in, where'd that come from?
I just clicked on the,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so if you click where there's a horizontal bar, and then click that little plus thing there, yeah.
Oh, right here. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah, I very well might have did Alt 7, I can't remember.
Watching, so then I wasn't sure how to recreate it.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, when I see people using notebooks, I don't know if I can quite put a percentage. I would say people brand new click on that plus a lot, and they really like it because it's sitting right in their face. I would say people use the format drop-down menu the least often, but people use it just to learn the keyboard shortcuts. And then once they're in week, I don't know, let's say week 3, then people use keyboard shortcuts. So I'm way past week 3, so you'll catch me doing keyboard shortcuts all the time. But I'm pretty addicted to keyboard shortcuts.
Can you also click in itself, right click? That's another option.
Um,
And in Mathematica. So no, right click on the action itself.
this? Huh, I don't ever do this. Interesting. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that doesn't show the keyboard shortcuts though, does it?
No, it doesn't, but it's, if you start typing and you want something else, sometimes it's just easier to, if you don't know the shortcut, just click on the cell.
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you. Yeah, and background color and size and clear formatting is sometimes very useful as well. I'll do clear formatting sometimes when I have a URL embedded and I just want to sort of get rid of it. Okay, let's, I don't want to get too far. I'm easily sidetracked, so I'm trying not to do that. Okay, let's do an integral of cosine 2x Okay, so the next thing that I want to show that has been popping up, but I haven't really talked about it, is this bar here for suggestions. So the first is step-by-step solution, but what I want to talk about is related computations. So if you click on this, there's a bunch of things that pop up. So these are all things that when you click on them, it creates a new Wolfram Alpha Notebook input cell, and then it does whatever it says. So maybe you want to do a definite integral over a half period, or an integral from 0 to infinity, whatever. A lot of times, though, you want to plot the function and the integral, so like the original function and then the integral. But when I do that, when I click on that button, it creates a new input here, and it says plot these two things, and then it gives me the plot. And we can see it's f and the integral of f. So these related computations, again, they keep you in this Wolfram Alpha Notebook mode, where when you're clicking on them, it's new inputs, but it's Wolfram Alpha Notebook inputs. If you have suggestions for more of these related computations, after we're done here, let us know, or after you've played for a couple weeks, let us know. Because we would be interested in what you'd like added in the future. But it's a good collection already.
Is there a way to turn off the interaction that we've seen so far and have it and switch to conventional Mathematica input style?
So by default, no. So when you go to a file, a new notebook, it is this mode. It only goes back to Mathematica mode if you get something that was created in Mathematica and you open it up here.
The reason I ask is I just opened up one of the presentations on machine learning, and it opened up just nicely, and there's
Yep.
a dynamic module, and it dynamicizes.
Yep. Yeah, and that's an important thing. So this separate installer and build is not a stripped down thing. It's more of we're guiding you through a path. We're guiding the workflow. We're not taking things out of the kernel or taking things out of the front end. And the case with your brother-in-law too. So if you work in Mathematica but your brother-in-law works in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, you sending something that you created in Mathematica that by design is supposed to work just fine.
Can you import things like Excel files into Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition?
You can, yes. I'll say we're a little young on that. So if you just say import and then a file path, it does work. I don't know if I have an example of that. It does work, but I will just make the general statement of it's for basic stuff. And I would say if you want to get into more data science or really drilling into data, you're going to hit that limit where you want Wolfram language more quickly than the stuff that we're doing.
If you wanted to share something that you've done with your brother-in-law,
Yeah, you could do that.
hypothetical
Yeah.
brother-in-law, actually brother, not brother. You could do stuff in your own, in Wolfram, in Mathematica, and it would have, you import Excel data, and maybe that command as written, he could change the name and import a different Excel file.
Yes.
I'll fiddle with that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep. That definitely will functionally work, and it's a perfectly good use case. I think a lot of times, though, when we think about this product, we're thinking about it from an authoring standpoint where they don't have you to coach them through the Wolfram language. They need something else to get them started. But yeah, technically it'll work.
I keep thinking this is cheating somehow. With my
Good.
brother-in-law.
Well, I mean,
Secret power.
yeah. I mean, they still need a subscription to this thing. I mean, if they've got this product or that product, there's a hobbyist version of both. And so in a sense, they choose the one that's a better fit for them or which resonates with them more, which might be Wolfram language, it might be this, but I think there are definite cases for both. Okay, let's do something where we do a derivative but a step-by-step solution. So let's type in derivative of,
Hey, Kelvin, real quick.
yeah,
A pretty good question here.
oh,
So the first time they tried to render that last example, they got an error message, just choosing it out of the options of related computations. Then when they did it the second time, so the plot function and integral, it worked.
interesting.
But in the output, there was also a gray box where some amount could not be rendered. Do you have an idea of why that is?
I do
Or
not.
what it could be? Because we don't actually even see anything missing from what you're showing versus
I
on
can
the
read
screen.
the error. It says, this dynamic content could not be displayed because dynamic updating has been disabled in the evaluation mode.
Oh. If you go to the evaluation drop-down menu, is that
Oh, is that
highlighted
clicked?
yes?
Try turning this, yeah.
On.
Yeah. Try clicking that.
Okay.
Oh.
Does anyone else have this problem?
Dynamic updating enabled, okay.
I'll just mention
Okay.
that these interactive Wolfram blobs are using dynamic front-end elements, so
Yeah,
you're
that,
definitely going to want to have dynamic evaluation.
Okay.
got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So let's finish our derivative here. So x plus 1 quantity squared. So there's two ways to do step-by-step solutions. First is just by clicking this button, which starts a new Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition input cell, so show steps. Or you can just type in directly show steps and then whatever equation you want. Either works just fine. Within the show steps, there's really two modes, and I think there's two very different motivations to have the mode. So if you're working through homework and you just want to work through one step at a time, so you work with this by hand, you decide it needs the chain rule, you decide that you're going to do the next step, and the next step, and the next step. This is a good way to work this out by hand, but check yourself as you go. I think the other mode, just the show all steps, is a good way just to figure out if you've got the right answer and then just sort of scan through pretty quickly. But from my perspective, the one by one is more useful, where students can check their check their homework as they go. When I've talked to people about this on the website, several people have told me this, and I find this really interesting. But one of the things that they like to do with it is use it as a crash course for 3 courses ago. So if you're teaching a junior level course and you need your students to remember something that they learned in freshman math and they don't quite remember it, this can be a 10 minutes before class crash course review. So it sort of gives you problems and it gives you this tutor for you. I think that's a really good use case for this. So you could start students out with a couple of these things, tell them to work it out by hand, but to have them double check it too.
Kelvin,
Yes.
could you try doing that as solve? And because there are some steps that allow you to use hints.
There's different kinds of steps content.
Yes. Okay. Sure.
Different content areas.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's stick with something simple here. Yes? Good? Okay. All right, so if we start with solve and then step by step. We can go through here and show, okay. Can you toggle the hints on and off in this?
I think hints are automatically on for the product.
Got it, okay.
We can add the button back, but I think right now in the hints are automatic.
Got it.
If you're going to show the next step, the hints are pedagogically what you want.
Yeah, thank you. And just to repeat that so everyone can hear. So the hints are sort of the in-between steps. So the idea is if you're working through this bit by bit by bit, it gives you the hint for, big picture, what should you be doing? And then you can practice doing it. And then when you say show the next step, then it says, great, you should have ended up with this. But it's a nice way to go through this without it showing you exactly the result with each step as you go through. Yeah.
I fat fingered something and I lost my notebook.
Okay.
And I was looking around in your preferences there, and there is a preference in the advanced side
For autosave? Okay, yeah. Stephen was talking about that in the Q&A. I knew nothing about that.
So it's there, and it would be nice if that were on by default.
I agree, yeah. So it's a funny thing. So in the browser-based version, the autosave is on by default, but there's not the multiple undo. In desktop, there's multiple undo, which is really, really useful, but not autosave. It's sort of like we've got 2 great ideas there that just need to mesh just a tiny little bit. Yeah.
It's in advanced.
Any other good step-by-step I should show?
Under open option inspector, and you can go in and get the notebook options, and then file options, and there's a notebook autosave toggle that you can set to autosave.
Okay, yeah, got it. It's good that that's in Notebook Edition as well. Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Blanking. You could do convert 100 to base 2, maybe?
Say that again?
Convert 100 to base 2. Has hints and steps.
Okay.
Cool.
Oh, this is cool. Okay, good. Yeah, I like the balanced chemical equations, and so the step-by-step solutions, there's a lot of that built in for a lot of different areas. Sometimes you think of it as Calc 1, chain rule sort of things, but there's a lot of depth and a lot of different problems that it knows. This one I didn't know either. This is a really good one. Yes?
On one of your earlier calculations where it returned Wolfram language code,
Yeah.
can you then manipulate that code?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So there.
Yes, so here, right. So when you click on this and you start to type in here, You can hit Shift Enter and reevaluate it. Yeah. So you have to hit Shift Enter, right? You're entering Wolfram language world. Yeah. So, and I mean, we would be curious to hear feedback about this. But one thing we talk a lot about is the wolframalpha.com users. What is the really useful bridge where they'll get into Wolfram language and appreciate the two for what they're respectively good at? So this is one thing that we're doing to encourage that. So if they start with a solve command and then they see the Wolfram language syntax and then they want to change it and tinker with it, then they certainly can. And then they're starting to use and know and learn Wolfram language. Yeah, Eric.
In that situation, they would not be familiar with the shift enter. Is there a way when they press 15 you can capture that shift enter key combination or enter that they would press?
Oh,
Bring up a
yeah.
flag or tag it?
Yeah. Let me, shoot.
So if you enter,
We,
press enter,
yeah.
click cell.
We had that for the Wolfram Alpha, where if you did the wrong thing, there was a little bar that came up to the right. But I don't think we talked about it for the Wolfram language. That's a good suggestion. I think Michael's left. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And probably when they hit enter, it should say, did you mean to hit shift enter? Yeah. All right, let's skip ahead and do some graphics. So I have been scrolling way up and way down. So if you want to do a new section of graphics, and I'm sorry, I just did a keyboard shortcut again. Okay, so cell insertion assistant and then section, or Alt and 4, or Command and 4 on a Mac, and then the graphics section. So let's do a graph of y equals 2x minus 2, and then let's have it be thick and red. So this is another thing that's handy where not only can you plot things, but you can start to style them as well in the everyday English, which is pretty neat. Also for graphics, if we say graph, something like 2 plus sine of a times x squared minus 2, varying a from 1 to 5. That might be unnecessarily complex, but to me, I always try to type things that are a little bit more complicated into the plain everyday English, just to see if things turn out like I think they should. But the point here is when you use varying, then it treats a as a symbol, but it is the local variable within the GUI here, where we're controlling it and going from 1 to 5. For those of you that know Mathematica, this works very well with plots. It doesn't work perfectly across the system. So you can't create any sort of manipulate that you can create in Wolfram language with this sort of varying kind of terminology. But it's very, very good at graphics. And initially what people want to do and what students want to do is graphics. So for the first rollout, that's really, really where it sings.
Kelvin,
Yeah.
just to point out to people, you can also add things like with grid lines, which I think is nice when doing more algebraic stuff with these functions. And apparently also axes labels works.
Axis labels. OK, let me go back up to the.
X and Y or something.
What does it want for axis label? Something like This? Mm.
Actually, labels.
Ah, okay.
And try to take out the parentheses and the comma.
Ah, there we go, good. I was being too cute then. It's thinking, too much thinking about curly brackets.
All of those things should work and probably will, with a little bit of parsing.
Those things that I just did? Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's nice. And grid lines are especially nice too, thank you. Yeah. How are we doing in time? Okay, so, okay, that's pretty good actually. All right, let's do some 3D plots. So if we say plot sine of x times cosine of 2y or something like that. Oh, that's not going to work. So one thing that's always nice is clicking on 3D graphics and rotating them, which works in the Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition as well, or holding Control and clicking and mousing up and down to zoom in. So those sort of things where you want to zoom in or rotate 3D graphics work really nicely. The other thing that's nice too is you can say something like contour plot of that same sine x cosine 2y. Oops. Yes. Yeah, I don't think that's a valid bug. You should be able to spell better than that. Okay, not a bug, but a suggestion. Okay, so contour plot. And then again, you can mouse over this to see these height values and get that interactivity. So a lot of these things that are really useful after you get these 3D plots, this interactivity exists in Notebook Edition just by default. And then things like creating a table of values. So if you say table of x squared, x from 0 to 100. So what you get back is a list of values. And then you can say graph that or graph percent. So percent sign, for those of you that like this or are used to this sort of notation, percent is the last calculation that you've done. So that works in Wolfram language, and if you're used to that, it works here as well. But you can say graph that as well. Yeah.
And this might not be something you can answer, but if you were to say Microsoft closing price for 2019, it gives you a data object out. Can you then graph that?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, yeah, I'm just curious, but.
I mean, you can get yesterday's price of Microsoft, but I don't have a lot of experience with getting the time series and then plotting that. So you're saying price of Microsoft from Jan 1, 2019 to yesterday. and then you get a time series, and then you say, graph that. Yeah. Yeah, so that works pretty well. Very well.
Could you table that data then, like you did in the?
I don't know. I think, yeah, I think probably, but I've seen limits with how far table can go. And I have bad habits where I make table just be Wolfram language and the, yeah, so.
You can also do Microsoft closing price over time for the time series. You can do things like population of France over time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
For the table that you generated of x squared from 0 to 100, can we take that output and then use it to find the function x squared?
Yeah, doing some linear regression. Yes. Well, yes. Although I don't know that this is going to work. Oh, well, okay, it does work. So this is why I say yes-ish. So there's some things in Wolfram language where you get fitted model back. So yes, it works. And then this is a decision that you might want to or might not want to make with students. So the Wolfram language suggestion bar is there as well. By default, it is turned off, but it is there. So if you have something like fitted model and you want to plot the fit, or you want to do something like basic properties, and you want to say, where's just the, well, whatever the, yeah. So like all those things that if you define a fitted model and then you want to extract properties of the fitted model. So the Wolfram language stuff is there. I think in the future this will work better in the Wolfram Alpha Notebook edition, but right now that is probably kind of one of those corners that you hit where the Wolfram Alpha Notebook edition ends and Wolfram language picks up. Would the two of you, would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's right. I think there's a limit to what Alpha can handle in terms of input string, but that's not what's actually happening here, because you get, it's divided by the percentage, so like the percentage stored in the kernel. That's one of the reasons behind the product is that you can do larger computations locally without that limitation of alpha.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Oh, right. And I have.
As we improve the parsing, what alpha over time, this will see better.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So the answer was this will improve. First. Second, a big thing that I forgot to mention is we do talk to quite a few students, college students, a lot of times engineering students, who use Wolfram Alpha, the website, and they're doing calculations, and they will say to us, I've hit the computation time. Like it just timed out, I can't do it anymore. So for those students that do want to do calculations in this everyday English, but they want a really long computation time, this would be a great format and a great solution to do it, because they're doing the computations locally, and we don't need to impose any sort of limit for them bogging down our servers or overloading our stuff or anything like that. This does hit the servers where it's parsing, where it's taking the everyday English and turning it into an input, but then the actual computation then happens locally. All right. Let's do a few charts next. So if you want to do something like a pie chart of just some randomly typed in data. Uh-oh. I must have done something odd here. What odd thing have I done here? I don't know. Okay, got it. So if you want to do a pie chart, or if you want to do a histogram, and again, when we think about the people who use this product, one thing that if they work with data in Excel, that building a histogram becomes a little bit of a chore. And so the idea of just saying histogram of this and getting a really nice histogram is pretty cool. All right, and then the second to last section that we want to create here is special characters. I want to have you get a feel for this. So did it for the 5th time here. Okay, so plus, and then section. And let's call this special characters. And then arrow down for a new cell. So click on this Enter Special Characters toggle on-off button here. So at the moment, for those of you that are used to Mathematica, there's a lot of typesetting built into the front end of Mathematica. This sort of typesetting is the starting point. There will be more to follow, basically. So one of the next big projects is 2D typesetting. And so there's a limited collection here, but it will grow over time.
I didn't catch, how do you get the,
This button up here, so the top right, special characters, yeah. All right, so let's click on the integral sign. So integral of cosine of 2x, or I won't put a space there. So since an integral is such a common thing to do, I don't need to say with respect to x or to be too specific about it. I can just use the integral sign and then say cosine 2x. You can also then directly click on the step-by-step solution button where you get that same step-by-step solution. So if you start, my meta point here is if you start on the track of using the typesetting, you can still do all the stuff that we've done so far, like the related computations or the step-by-step solutions or anything like that. The other thing that we can do, so click on the pi symbol. So pi to 1,000 digits. So before we entered this, but we did capital Pi, whereas the pi symbol is much more descriptive. And then let's do one more. Let's do a limit of 1 over beta as beta approaches infinity. Yeah, sorry, Eric.
I just want to point out, when I'm using my MacBook Air, I don't have a lot of height on the display, but I have width.
Oh, I see.
And just pointing out under the palettes, there's a special characters palette, special characters, and the writing assistant, so you could leverage width of the screen.
Yeah, okay. And that's actually a really, really good point. So, so under palettes, there is a writing assistant palette. And for those of you that know Mathematica really well, this will be a little bit confusing. I think those who don't know any better, this won't be very confusing. But these palettes that you're used to with the 2D typesetting, they really are only going to work in text cells and title cells in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. So the Wolfram Alpha input cells at this point do not support 2D typesetting.
You mentioned that because I clicked on, if you go down to the typesetting, go down to the bottom of the palette, and you're going to see the integral symbol.
Yeah.
That will go into a Notebook Alpha input cell and evaluate.
And it worked for you?
Yeah.
With upper and lower bounds, or just with,
Just the indefinite.
yeah, so that's not two-dimensional then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's things like power and things that might be upper and lower limits, that won't work with the input.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah. So we kept it in there because if you want to make a quiz and have questions that have nice typesetting, then you've got the palette to do that. But then for the actual calculations, yeah, you've got to stick to the 1D. And there's a larger project to support this all, I think, both on the website and in this product. So there's a sort of meta project that'll benefit this a lot. Is that a basic, accurate description?
We recently done the front end of the website, which is live in production, and we're thinking now, but part of the redesign that's going forward is we're going to have two-dimensional input as well, and some of our second list constructs like this as well, to support modern LCD interface.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, then the last thing that I want everyone to do, well, last thing A is file save. So save your work if you haven't saved in a while, or if you haven't turned on autosave as you have. And then let's click to get rid of this. But go to File, and then New, and then Presenter Notebook. So right now, yeah, okay. So right now, classic slideshows are not a part of Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, but the newer presentation tools are. So in terms of workflow, and actually I do this pretty much as my common workflow anyway, but if you want to make a slideshow, you can either just author in that environment, or you can just start to grab things from a regular notebook where you copy cells and then you paste them in here. If you want to make a new slide, so click your horizontal bar and then click on Insert New Slide, and then that's what makes the slide break. So when I gave my last talk, I created the talk in a regular notebook. I copied it into a presentation tool slideshow. I just added some page breaks. And then when you start your presentation, then it takes over the full screen. And then it's the full screen for presenting, just like any other presenter tools notebook. Oh, sorry. So I highlight the cells to the right. So I highlight that, and I mean, if you right-click on it, you can choose copy, or I do Control-C. And if you copy that cell, that collection of input and output cells, and then put your cursor anywhere in the new notebook and hit Control-V or paste, which it just pasted the same thing twice, but then it copies into the new notebook, and then you can start to add the slide breaks. So it's the concept of a notebook is a notebook, so copying and pasting whole blocks of cells from this one notebook to another works just fine. And then, then of course these are live computations as well, of course. So if I go into Start Presentation and full screen mode, not only can I go in here and change this and reevaluate it on the fly, so it's a live presentation, but I can also add new computations at the end, and I can edit notebooks as well. And I'll turn that off because it's off by default.
Can I save my original notebook as presentation?
Yes.
And that would be under Save As?
Correct. Yes.
I don't see the presentations.
It saves as a notebook. It's same notebook format, correct. So sometimes I end up with two different files, both as notebooks, one which is just the regular notebook, one which is the slides. And sometimes I abandon the first and I just have slides. But in either case, it's .nb format because it's always this live editable presentation document.
We need to have an internet connection in order to do this.
Yes, okay, good question. So yes, you do need to have an internet connection. So the piece that uses our servers is the piece that takes your everyday English and turns it into a computation, and then the computation happens locally, but you have to have an internet connection for that first piece, yes. And at this point too, I'll just sort of stop and open it up to general questions as well, because we only have about 7 minutes left. So are there other just general questions? Yeah?
You answered this before, so I apologize. You just want to put in natural or Wolfram language input into a cell. How do you do that? You don't get the natural language.
Yeah, so by default, it encourages you not to do that. So if a Mathematica user sends you a notebook and it's got regular input cells, you can add to them, you can change them, you can do things. I think there's probably also a keyboard shortcut to do that, although I can't remember what it is offhand. But maybe Alt 8 or Alt 9 or something. Alt 0? Ah, okay, and then select input, yeah. Yeah. But the spirit of this product is we want this to be a different introduction to the technology stack. So they will see Wolfram language after they do the freeform input, but our intention is they see it done and they can tinker it and then they can learn the language that way. If they want to author Wolfram language from scratch, that's Mathematica, Mathematica Online. That's sort of, we feel that that's sort of like the line in the sand between the two, and that different people will use them in different styles. One won't replace the other. It's just a different workflow for different people kind of thing. Any other general questions? All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. I hope this was entertaining. I'll put my email up here as well if you want to jot it down. And if you have questions or comments or things that you thought were too drilled in for the session, feel free to jot my email down.
Are there any example slides, notebooks?
Yes, there are one or two on the website where they're example projects where it goes through kind of the progression of you start with a question, you explore some things algebraically, you do some graphics, things like that. So there's starting to be things like that. But to turn the question around a little bit, that's what we hope people will do. So we want to give you these 4-month licenses, have you create some things, and then let us know what you created, and we'd love for you to share it and to help you share it. We're really good at technology. You are really good at teaching. So we're realistic about who's good at what. And we enjoy seeing your ideas a lot. Yeah. Also, too, myself and a couple other people are going to create a reference text that will be a couple hundred pages. It's at least a few months off. But that being the sort of scope of what the product is good at, and it will have some examples as well. So that is in the pipeline as well. But I think that you'll see that more as a reference text and jumping off point to creating your own things, and less about you take that and plug it into a calculus class or algebra 2 class or something like that.